So, the name of it is Promoting Independence and Self-Regulation. We looked at something called S.O.L.T. So I'm not sure if you've heard of S.O.L.T, but S.O.L.T is the self-organised learning time that we created a type of strategy in our school that seemed to work for us. It came from us wanting to develop independent learning skills in our children and our young people. We noticed that although we were doing lots in our school and our children were doing well, we felt that there was more that we could do around developing their independence. We had really strong teachers and TAs who we felt might be doing almost too much to support our children.
Right, sorry, can I just interrupt and say,
we looked at S.O.L.T. S.O.L.T comes from the work of Sugata Mitra. What he did in 1999 was left a computer with internet attached to it in English in a wall in the middle of Delhi. Children came to the computer, he filmed what happened and just stepped back and watched from a distance. Now, bearing in mind this was their second language, so he was really interested to see exactly what would happen. So what did happen? Well, children began to learn for themselves. And this isn't necessarily a surprise to many of us. As practitioners, we know that children do learn for themselves, especially if we're working in early years and we see how children tend to learn through play, through investigation, through their curiosity. But one of the things that we felt in our school was, although that was happening, it was almost happening a lot in early years, a little bit in Key Stage 1, and almost coming of their natural way of being by the time they got into Key Stage 2. So we wanted to make sure that that love of learning carried on. So what did he notice? So his findings were that he could see children learning exponentially. So their learning grew over time. His work also grew, and he did the same experiment in lots of different countries, keeping computers just in a wall, standing back, seeing what happened. And he noticed that children would come up, use the internet, find things out for themselves. But one of the curious things was that they would then automatically become teachers themselves and share that learning with everybody else within the group. He saw that they were natural problem solvers and that they could, after a while, self-regulate given the right conditions. He felt the right conditions were about having adults stepping back and giving them time. So he found that the ideal conditions were to have a diverse group, so different ages, different types of children, some leaders, some followers, some unsupervised time, a large enough screen for everyone to get involved, and public place so that there was safety, that behaviour would be in a certain way because it wasn't a private place, and then encouragement. So he called this the grandmother effect, and this was just literally somebody in the group, and it could be an older person, it could be an older child, encouraging, not teaching, but just saying, that looks really great, tell me about it, how have you done that, show me, I wouldn't know how to do that. So those were the main points that he came out with. So we've taken the work of Sugata Mitra and adapted it to fit our school. So we call it S.O.L.T, self-organised learning time, because we have a specific time within the timetable in which we do it. And that time is for PPA time. And we have our teachers giving the questions to our TAs, and our TAs being the grandmothers. But before any of this could happen, we realised we need to create the right attitudes to learning. We needed to create the right groundwork in which these children would behave and behave for learning in these S.O.L.T times. So the first thing that we did in our school was really develop growth mindset in our children. We did that by making sure that they really believed in themselves as learners, and they really believed that through dedication, through hard work, they could change the way that they were thinking, they could develop their skills, their understanding, their knowledge, and that they understood that resilience played a huge part in this. in order to be successful, they needed to know that they had to practice the hard bits, that it wasn't something that they could find easy, but that the hard work was the key thing. So once we'd really developed growth mindset in our children and our teachers, we then used attitudes for learning as the next step. So changing and ensuring that our attitudes for learning were exactly as they should be. So we used the work of Bill Lucas and Guy Claxton, and from their book Educating Ruby, not Educating Rita, and developed these learning powers, which became like a toolbox for our children. We used collaboration, communication, creativity, curiosity, confidence, craftsmanship, and commitment as that toolbox for learning. And then we slowly unpicked what each of those words meant and created attributes that would be attached to those words. So, for example, collaboration wasn't just working with others, it was knowing when to lead, knowing when to follow, when to speak up, when to stay silent, how to ask for help, how to be empathetic. It's all the effective teamwork that's necessary in so many different walks of life. Communication, we looked at that and we taught our children that it was about how you can communicate your thoughts, your ideas, concerns, your emotions, and that this is really crucial in being successful, and especially in being successful working with others. Communication came in writing, speaking, body language, drama. It wasn't just one aspect, so it was all different ways that we can communicate, but it was how to be clear and honest, how to grow your vocabulary, how to respect and understand others as well. The next one was creativity. We really taught our children about having crazy ideas and being proud of them, being resolute and seeing them through. So not just having the idea and letting it fall there, but coming back to that resilience, coming back to thinking, I'm going to see this through and see if it works. And if it doesn't, that's fine. It was about being logical, solving problems, but being imaginative and trying new things. Then we taught them about curiosity. That's all about the wanting to find out new things, the understanding of the power of yet, linking that back to the growth mindset, asking questions, reasoning things through, challenging themselves, and understanding that mistakes are a crucial part of learning. Then we built their confidence and told them how important it was to believe in themselves, to be resilient and optimistic, to be positive and have that can-do attitude. And we did that in lots of different ways within the classroom and out of the classroom, through drama, through presentations. And confidence about believing that you have your own unique attributes. Almost lastly, we talked about craftsmanship, about being determined to practice the hard bits, to finish things to a high standard, to go back and redraft and redo and not just be happy with the first draft of something, and then to feel what success feels like and enjoy that feeling. Finally, it was commitment, being resilient and enjoying the feeling of a challenge, not being afraid of hard work, but being patient and taking responsibility to get things done for yourselves. So we looked at all of these. We had our growth mindset, so that belief that we could change and develop. We had the learning powers, which became a toolbox for learning, and that changed the attitudes to learning for our children. And then finally, it was about the behaviours for learning. So with this, we really looked at the work of Ken Robinson and his Creative Schools book in particular. And we picked out these 4 E's from there. We considered how are we going to enable, engage, empower, and have high expectations for our children. So what we did really with the enabling, we felt that our learning powers were enabling them to become effective learners. Our growth mindset was enabling them to believe in themselves. We engaged our children by really looking at our curriculum, having a creative cross-curricular approach to learning, often 3 or 4 subjects being taught in one afternoon, but finding those meaningful links between the subjects and making sure that those links were authentic and that the learning was relevant for the children. So a lot of children's voice in how we learn, what we're going to learn next. We empowered our children by giving them the opportunity to speak, by giving them coaching sessions so that they could create goals for themselves that they could work towards, and by giving them the feeling that they had some choice in their learning. And then lastly, expectations. We all had high expectations for our children. So it was that pulling away from the idea of ability, pulling away from the idea of the fixed mindset, but really embedding the ideas both in the staff and the children that everybody can succeed, that it might take some children longer than others, but that you have to believe in those children in order to be able to help them to succeed and to help them understand that they can succeed. So it was about creating a staff that were champions for all children. So that was the groundwork we did before we even started the S.O.L.T. Once we felt those things were in place, we began the S.O.L.T. sessions. And as I said earlier, we timetabled it in so it was a way that we could cover our PPA time in a really effective and impactful way. So what are the rules? We decided that it was going to be with groups of children of no more than 4, but crucially they chose who were in the groups. It wasn't about teachers putting them into groups. Each group had one computer or one device, and we did use iPads as well, but it needed to be one so that they were learning those collaboration skills. They were taking time, they were leading, they were stepping back, they were talking, they were listening. The teacher set the question, and the question would often be around the topic that they were learning or part of the subject. And initially, questions were quite simple, such as what are verb tenses, and the children would go away and find that. But those questions became more and more complex and challenging over time. Some examples are things like, is it better to live in a democratic country or a communist country, and why? Do people with long arms have longer throws? Can we stay safe online and still have fun? What is the Holocaust and who did it affect? So you can see the questions were really about what the teacher wanted the children to get really thinking about and get really stuck in with. The children were allowed to move around. So it was, if you walked into a S.O.L.T. session, it was quite loud. It could sometimes seem quite frenetic, but what I always noticed with the children were, they might be talking, but they were talking about the question they were trying to answer. They often would go to other groups and find out information from them and bring it back to their group, and that was absolutely fine too, because that's real life. So it wasn't seen as cheating to go over and say, what have you found out? Brilliant, I'm going to go and use that with my group. The TA or the teacher was always the facilitator. So they were in that grandmother position. They were offering praise and support only. So they would walk around the room, they would make sure that children were on task, but it was through asking engaging questions. Head over the shoulder of a child saying, what have you learned? What have you found? How did you do that? Where did you find that information? Show me. So it was all about that encouragement. And finally, the children had to present their findings. So we felt there needed to be an end goal. There needed to be something that they were working towards with their learning, and so that they could feel proud of what they'd learned. And it didn't matter how they presented their findings. They could do a PowerPoint, they could do a poem, they could just stand and talk, they could share in any way that they felt comfortable with. What was the impact? Well, the impact was that the sessions started off a little bit more frenetic, but slowly settled down as children began to get more out of the sessions themselves and see the worth of those sessions. In the beginning, they still asked lots of questions and would ask silly things like, where's a pencil, and my computer's gone blank, but realised that actually the TAs were becoming more confident in standing back and playing that grandmother role. So the children just got on with it and asked each other. The children asked for more S.O.L.T. sessions. They loved the autonomy, they loved the opportunity to choose who to work with and how to present their learning. They also began taking their S.O.L.T. lessons home. So even though we weren't sending it home as home learning at this point, the children were doing the S.O.L.T. at home. So they were taking the question and thinking, I haven't quite got to the bottom of this, going home and continuing their learning. And then as a result of this, and as a result of the repeated way that they were learning, finding things out for themselves, reading things on the internet, sharing it within their group, presenting it, talking to the teacher about it the next day, we noticed that there was lots and lots of deep learning happening because of that repetition. So the positive impacts for us, the first one was the improved independence skills. So that was the outcome that we had wanted initially, and we felt actually we started seeing those skills really positively in S.O.L.T, maybe less positively in other lessons. So in the beginning, those children didn't transfer those skills. But what we found was really interesting, our TAs and our teachers were able to remind the children how they had behaved the previous afternoon. Yesterday, you managed to solve that for yourself. Remember how brilliant you were yesterday in your S.O.L.T session at doing such and such. Why not give it a go now? And as soon as they made those links obvious for the children, those independent learning skills started to happen across all subjects. The second impact was the increased engagement. As I said, the children absolutely loved the S.O.L.T sessions. They wanted to see more of it. They wanted to have it almost as a part of the normal session. And so teachers started to do that. Less talk and talk, more opportunity for time in ordinary maths or English or geography lessons where the teachers stepped back, gave questions, let children choose their groups. So the types of learning they were doing in S.O.L.T, they began to bring in across the timetable. And that really increased children's engagement in their learning. And then finally, that deeper learning. Because there was that repetition within S.O.L.T where you're reading something, going to another page, reading it again, sharing it within your group, thinking about how you're going to present it, then present it. You're just building those neural pathways and new learning becomes further and further embedded. And we noticed that as we were asking children things 6 months on, they could remember it because they'd learned it in the S.O.L.T session. So 3 really fantastic positive impacts to using S.O.L.T. So Professor Sugata Mitra, as I said, ended up doing lots of work across many different countries, developing countries as well as the developed countries, finally ending up in Newcastle University. He's done about 4 TED Talks, and I really recommend you watching them to find out more about this. And as I say, we've not done it the same way necessarily as he has. We've taken all our ideas from him and just made them work in our own context. And the books that I mentioned, so I'm sure you've all heard of all of these, but these were the ones that were crucial in really getting the right conditions in place before we even started the S.O.L.T. So the growth mindset with Harry Dweck, and it's not just about teaching it, it's about believing in it and getting the staff to believe in it. Educating Ruby by Guy Claxton and Lucas, and just finding those tools, and you might choose different ones in your school, but finding tools for learning that the children develop over time. And then Ken Robinson's Creative School, really thinking about how we can engage and empower and enable our children, but have those high expectations too. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing there. And if anybody has any questions for me, they can put it in the chat. I can see there's a few chats here, so I'm going to just have a look. Thank you for enjoying the idea. That's great. There's the self-efficacy, absolutely, making sure that we're thinking about how we teach children to understand that they can make a choice, make a difference, make a change in their lives. So that comes for us really side by side with the self-regulation, making sure that not only do children know how to regulate their emotions and their behaviours and their habits to be better learners, but believing that they can make a real difference. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I'm just having a look, see if there's any more questions there. I really read, oh, somebody else has said they've loved the book, Educating Ruby. It is great, really, really lots of ideas from there. As I say, we just picked out a few. And the same with the creative schools, using that, making sure that you, again, just make it work for your own context. And thank you. Yeah, I think everything I've said, even though I'm working in primary, all of this can be used in secondary. And I think the key thing is about building those independent skills and remembering that actually the children naturally have it, that they're like that in early years. So absolutely, right up until A level, they've got those independent working skills. We just need to bring it out of them. So that's 20 minutes. I've been told to keep to time. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me. Bye.